Good morning. It is Monday morning, the 28th and final day this year of February. I say this year, I was just talking, Kristen Boice, welcome to Mental Health Monday. Before I go on this whole tangent here in a second, I'm Chris Jenson, mayor of Noblesville, and I'm here joined by my friend, owner of Pathways to Healing Counseling, Kristen Boice. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning, Mayor Jenson. Happy to be here with you.
Glad to have you. I was just going to point out February 29th, which is a few months ago, you may recall Chuck Haberman, who is our Assistant Director of Economic Development, former Marine, did an awesome job coming on talking about veterans and the needs that they have around mental health. But it's his birthday tomorrow, what would be tomorrow, but it's actually February 29th. So anyways, happy birthday, Chuck Haberman, if you're listening to this, whenever it actually falls. I think he's 5 years old or something like that. So anyways, it is a beautiful Monday morning in the city of Noblesville. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are today. We know we have friends watching all over the world, which is awesome. Shout out to my friends down in Brazil who I'm going to marry later this summer, and just some really cool things. We are here on another edition of Mental Health Monday, going to talk about all things. Actually, Kristen, one of my favorite topics. I know you might think anxiety, stress. Why is that one of your favorite topics? It's something I deal with all the time, and something I've had to work through and I've had to grow through. So it's something that I'll be very open and honest with about, dealing with that. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk a little bit how we deal with that, not only in ourselves, but in maybe our kids and those around us. Kristen, we may even touch a little bit in the office setting, how we deal with stress and anxiety, and how we maybe model some good behavior for others around stress and anxiety. So I am very excited for this topic here today. If you are joining us this morning and have a question in real time, insert in the chat. We'll try to answer it. If I can't answer it on the fly or Kristen can't, we'll get back to you later. If you want to just say hi, hello, and let us know that you're watching, that's great as well. So we know a lot of folks watch this on recording as the week goes on. Feel free to say hi if you want to. Anyways, we'll go back and check it and make sure we know that you were with us here this morning. So speaking of stress and anxiety, one of the best things for it is to make sure we breathe. Good morning, Jenna Stewart. Make sure that we breathe. And so let's start with a little square breathing exercise to get us kicked off. Take it away, Kristen.
Okay, right now there's a lot going on in the world, which can stir up a lot of fear and anxiety and stress, and also for our children. So the first step is for us all to work on regulating ourselves, to calm ourselves, to soothe ourselves, to nurture ourselves. And this is the first place I start, is square breathing. We're going to put our feet on the floor. So that helps ground and center our nervous system. And then we're going to inhale through our nose for 4, hold for 4, and slowly exhale out our mouths for 8. It's like you're cooling soup or cooling a cookie, as I tell the kids, or I just did an exercise with the preschool, Noblesville Methodist Preschool, on blowing bubbles. So you can do it any way you want. The first place, though, is to start with you. So if you want your kids to calm down, you want your teens to get regulated, you want the people around you to calm down, first place we have to start is with us. So feet on the floor, let's practice together. I kind of get settled in my chair. If you're standing, just kind of really pressing your feet into the ground. We're going to take a big, deep inhale through our nose. Big, deep inhale. And release. As I was doing with the children, we were blowing these bubbles. So we went inhale, exhale, blow your bubble. And they were trying to get their bubbles so big, it was precious. It was like they all were. And I was like, okay, let's condense our bubbles so we don't. So one of the things that it helps, one of the most important things that I can emphasize is if you can work on every hour 5 to 6 breaths, and you make an intention to focus on your breath, because anxiety wants to take us into the future and the what ifs. We what if everything. So the first thing is take it back to the breath over and over and over. And it's not natural. So people are like, this doesn't work for me. I'm like, yeah, you got to keep at it. You got to keep practicing, because eventually your brain then will be cued to go to your breath automatically. And that's just through practice. That's through intention. So you found it so helpful. I know you talked about it so much on our show.
Yeah, so helpful. And it seems so easy, like, oh yeah, you should breathe. Well, duh. No, it really is a total, in the sense you feel, if you just try it out, you will feel a sense of calm come over you. And in that moment, if you are an anxious person or deal with stress, or, you may be in a fight, flight, or fawn,
and freeze. One of the
freeze. Thank you. I knew there's one more. Sorry. I
There's
should
some-
say to Marion and not counseling here. When you're in those moments, if you can, what you're grasping for whatever tool you have in your toolbox, right? And so the breath has been so important for me. Other thing that's important for me around anxiety, especially, is that you've made it very clear over the past almost 2 years now, FYI, that anxiety lives in the body. And at first, the more I think about that, that's why it's so important. I try to use exercise, for example, or just getting out and moving, however you're able to move, to let your body process that. But I also visualize that with the breath as well, of me blowing out those anxious thoughts or blowing out that anxious energy has mentally been very, very helpful for me.
I'm so glad. And I know you're doing OTF and that challenge and getting up. And do you notice a difference, like before you go in and then the after?
Absolutely. And I try to go 3 to 4 times a week. And so if there's a day off or something, which is really important for the body, right? But then I feel the natural endorphins I get from exercising is just effervescent for me. As much it makes up for the 4:25 a.m. alarm, because I feel so much better after I am done. That just kind of resets me in the morning, and gets me to a much better headspace. So and again, exercise looks different for everybody. Getting up and moving looks different for everybody, but that's really how I help to manage this a little bit.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. Again, we've been dancing kind of around this anxiety conversation. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, certainly right now, but even not just, I don't want to just put the parameters that right now, COVID, international affairs, certainly my 11-year-old the other day asked me about Ukraine and Russia. And so that's a big ask from an 11-year-old. So there's not only just external things going on, but you're still kind of in this hard march if you're a parent towards spring break. It's still a little bit cold outside. There's all sorts of reasons to be anxious and have anxiety. So let's dive right into it, maybe what it looks like a little bit, Kristen, and how it manifests in different people's lives. And then maybe we can move to kind of the exercises to get us working through it.
So the first thing we say is when we say I am anxious, we're like actually embodying the anxiety. So I like to say I feel anxious. And then after that, we go, okay, what's underneath that anxiety? Fear. A lot of times it's fear. What am I afraid of? I'm afraid of something bad happening. I'm afraid of the next shoe to drop. I'm afraid someone's not going to like me. I'm afraid of rejection. I'm afraid of being judged. I mean, there's so many things. But at the end of the day, we want to know we're safe. So we have to create an internal felt sense of safety. I work with my girls on this because there's been a lot of anxiety. Our teens are at the highest rate of anxiety in history. And there's a number of factors there because they're exposed to news on a regular basis. Think about it. When we grew up, there is, and depending on what generation you're in, it might have been just the newspaper, it might have been the radio. And then there was the, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news. And that was kind of it until the 11 o'clock news came on. And it might have been playing in the background. But now we're inundated on social media. It's everywhere on the internet. There's an immersion in it. And unless we start creating some distance, like I tell parents to not have the TV on with the news on in the background, even with little kids, because they can't process that. So the first thing is we've got to go, what am I feeling? Okay, I've got to create a felt sense of safety in my body. And so if I've got a trauma response, which we've talked about, which you named fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Fawning is that people pleasing, kind of placating survival mechanism that kicks in. That needs to be tended to through the breath, through some regulating, and through naming what I'm feeling. So I feel afraid rather than I am afraid. Distance that from the body. Asking yourself, where do I feel that in my body? So as you said, the body keeps the score. There's a great book by Dr. Basil Vanderkolk called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's about how the body remembers all your life experiences. The brain might not able to implicitly or explicitly, that's like, oh, I remember that. It might because everything's stored on the database. It might be an implicit memory where it's stored on the hard drive, but I don't really remember it. But the body remembers everything. So the key to working through anxiety is you got to learn to connect to your body. And a lot of times we live very disconnected from our body because we've been in survival states. That's why that breath is so important to work through anxiety. So I was working with my girls and I said, name what you're feeling. I'm feeling afraid. Okay, what are you afraid of? So I'm kind of teaching you some questions. What are you feeling? Not how does that make you feel? Because that's a very different question. Things can't make us feel a certain way. It's how are you feeling? So that is a less constraining question. And they might say, I don't know. A lot of kids go, I don't know. And I go, because that's a safe answer, right? They don't have to be judged. They don't have to be lectured. They don't have to be told how they're wrong, or they don't have to have someone fix it. So they're like, I'm just going to say I know, and they might not know, and that's okay. And I'll say, that makes sense. Is there something else going on? What are you feeling in your body? And if adults can't connect to their own bodies, it's going to be hard for you to walk someone else through this because you're living disconnected. So it's going to be hard for you to ask your kids what they're feeling because you're not connected physically to what your own emotions or your body. So those are some of the key pieces: naming it, acknowledging it, bring it to the light. Because what we keep in the dark metastasizes, it grows. We can't rehabilitate it. We can't tend to it if we keep it in the dark. So bringing anxiety to the light, bringing it out, and underneath, really anxiety is a secondary emotion. What does that mean? It means there's other feelings that are underneath that, like I said. So part of the process is naming those emotions that are underneath that anxiety. Shame is a big one. That's a secondary emotion, saying I don't feel good enough. A lot of times when we don't feel good enough, we have anxiety about what people think of us. We have fear about being rejected, judged, whatever that is for you. But the first thing is naming it. So when you have anxiety, what are your physical symptoms?
Me personally, I kind of get the pit in the stomach at times, maybe like a more of a rapid heart rate. Of some kind, and sometimes even some tingling of my arms and legs, if you will. So that's kind of, those are the symptoms that manifest in me. Just being honest with you. There you go.
Yeah, sometimes we can get even like flushed.
Yeah, and even almost like the heartbeat in the head type thing. Yeah,
you're kind of feeling sweaty. You're feeling you feel almost, sometimes it almost feels out of body for people. They're like, I almost feel like I'm not even connected to my body. So it's really important to kind of know your own physical symptoms of anxiety and how that lives in your body.
One thing I've learned is that when that comes over me, whether it be an instance like if I'm anxious of a decision of some sort or a speech, or if something's going on at home, I think one of the things I've tried to teach myself is to A, breathe through it, but B, sit in it for a few minutes before making any decision based on that anxiety. That's been big for me because I'll make a rash decision or do something and then later even regret and have shame built onto that I did a decision based on my anxiety. And I need to learn to step it back for a second, breathe through it, get myself centered before moving forward.
So there's scientific research that says when we're in anxiety, we speed things up because we want it to go away. We want to feel better. We want relief. We want the pain to go away. We want the fear to go away. So we want to extinguish it. So we move really quickly. And you're spot on. So what research says is to slow it down instead of speeding it up. So how do we slow it down? This is very hard to do. It sounds very easy how we're like, and just breathe. No, I'm having to work at this because I want that anxiety. The anxiety is trying to protect us from all those things, that all the bad things, which really doesn't work. So when you slow it down, like you said, you have clarity, you have calm, you have connection. You're actually easier to connect with because you're not trying to, you'll see people's rapid speech, when they're getting up for a speak, they're speeding up because their body is in that forward momentum. They have adrenaline, right? And so you'll see if you can slow things down and almost pause. People get really uncomfortable with pauses. And I'm like, pauses are powerful. Then we lean in and respond. And you might even say, I need a minute. I need 10 minutes. I will come back. This is what people don't do. They're like, I can't talk to you right now. But the other person's left like, well, when can we talk about this? let the person know when you might be able to come back and recircle the conversation or give them an answer. I might say, you know what, I need to think about that and I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Well, and that's what, and again, I say that and I probably do it 6% of the time. So it's still very much a learning thing for me. But that pause, to your point, is A, unnatural, but B, has a much more fulfilling after effect on a decision or a comment or a, whatever it may be, if you're able to practice that going through it. And I think to your point, I think the visual you said there is that when you are anxious or stressed or whatever it may be, you want to get to the other side of that. So you're looking for any answer to get yourself through, whether it's right or wrong. However, if you end up on the wrong side, the shame that kicks in after the fact is just going to continue to amplify that anxiety.
And I notice that with parenting a lot. If I've reacted, because I'm just like, stop, stop.
Yeah.
You're just great. Like, I just need you to stop. I end up functioning in a way that I am not. It brings, like you said, the shame comes up and I feel like, oh, why did I do that? And it's a teacher for me to go, oh, because you wanted it to extinguish the behavior and you didn't self-soothe and self-regulate beforehand. And this takes so much self-awareness and work, because our knee-jerk reaction is to extinguish the behavior we don't like, or what someone's saying, or our feeling afraid. And so we want that to go away. And some people get angry when they get anxious. It's very interesting. Like, what do you do when you feel anxious? So if I'm anxious and I'm ready to get out the door and people aren't moving fast enough, I can start speeding things up and I can start, hurry up. And
does that help?
Absolutely not. It makes it worse, because I appear angry now. I appear angry instead of regulated. The calmer I am, oxygen mask on myself first, then I can assist, the more effective it is in creating regulation, not only for myself, but it's transmittable, right? Now we're all calmed down. If I get escalated, guess what everybody else does? We're all escalated now. We're all flipped. And nobody is able to have clarity of thought.
Yeah, I just picture us going to church on Sunday mornings, and I usually, like, when I'm anxious, I'm short-tempered and I'm rushing people along and I'm trying to tell my 5-year-old to get his shoes on. Well, and again, it just makes things 10 times worse. So that's something I've got to start working on and being better. I want to go back to, and while I'm in this great therapeutic mindset of admitting my flaws, I always have the TV on with the news on at home, and so that's really helpful to know. And my good friend Oksana just chimed in here. Used to work for the city of Noblesville, an awesome new mom. Talked about her. She's from Ukraine. Is being attacked at her hometown. And first of all, Oksana, our thoughts and prayers with you and your family. But there's some real life stuff going on, like I said, with Ukraine and stuff that my 11-year-old might be able to kind of get his head around, but 6 and 5-year-olds are certainly not going to. So being better about usage of television, I think, is something that I personally have to work on.
Yeah. And being able to let them tell you what they're scared about or what they're sad about. It's hard. Maybe they've seen some images. I know some classrooms are showing images. They're depending on the age, that can be very traumatizing for children, because they're afraid that's going to happen to us. And that makes sense, doesn't it? They're afraid of seeing those images creates fear in the body and their nervous system, and it can land as trauma, because there is trauma going on in the world. There is trauma going on in the world. There is loss and grief. So yes, when they hear images or see images that they can't process, it's left in their nervous system, and they may have some behaviors that are unexpected, dysregulated as a result. They may not have the words, or they might not even recognize that that's impacted them. And a lot of times right now, what I'm seeing is they are coming home and saying that they're upset about this. They're scared about this. Let them talk about it. Let them process it. It is sad what's happening. And
sorry, excuse me. I was going to pivot real quick too, because while we're on this kid topic, Jenna Stewart asked a great question about screen time and anxiety and linkage. I know you have a lot of thoughts around that. She is like so many parents saying that she's being lobbied hard by her 6th grader. My 5th grader is doing the same thing. When's the appropriate time to have a smartphone? Those type of things. Do you want to touch on that kind of while we're on this impressionism with kids topic?
Yeah, that's a great point that I am seeing a high correlation. There's a lot of research also being done at this point on screen time and anxiety and depression, and it's sky high. So what we know is if we take a PET scan of children that have been on devices, and it looks like they're on a drug. So that it lights up the same way. And what I mean by lights up the same way is they're in that amygdala and the brainstem, that fight, flight, or freeze response, and that prefrontal cortex, which is the CEO of the brain, the rational thought is getting stunted. So that doesn't light up. So that prefrontal cortex we're seeing is stunted. So that executive function that we need to regulate, to calm down, to get back to center is delayed. And so I highly recommend this is super hard. I have 2 teens. I get it. This is not for the faint of heart. I don't recommend social media for various reasons. They don't have the processing ability to comprehend why they don't get invited to something. And furthermore, especially in girls, we're seeing body image, so body dysmorphia and comparison, which is creating so much shame, suicidal ideation, and depression. And so I recommend limited exposure to screen time as a result, because I do see an uptick in anxiety. And for those neurodiversity kiddos, I'm really seeing how impactful screen time is to their mental health. And so you've got to know your own kid. You've got to know what works for them. I remember when my littlest would watch Dora the Explorer. I mean, you think it's Dora. All of a sudden she'd get more aggressive. I was like, what's happening? But there was a correlation between what she was watching and how she was feeling in her behavior. And being attuned and watching your kiddo, you know them best. And it's hard to hold those boundaries, and they're unable to do it themselves because they don't have the brain development.
Yeah, I think you had a good point. Those boundaries are hard because, as parents, we sit here and say, no screen time this time. And then, days go by and life happens, and I'm super guilty of that, trying to put down boundaries for them on screen time or whatever it may be. And then on a Saturday afternoon, Dad would love to just lay down on the couch as well. And that iPad just really helps out. So, easier said than done is the whole theme of this entire conversation here today, to admit our human flaws. So, well, thank you. That was, like I said, that whole topic will continue on this spring as we continue to kind of hit on anxiety in kids and how to help some of these parents and grandparents who are doing extraordinary, amazing things, trying to lead our next generation of youth through this. Let's pivot here in the remaining time and talk a little bit about stress. And coping with stress, and maybe stress in the workplace, for example. People may have horrible bosses. Half my staff is nodding in the background. What does stress look like in people? How do we identify it in ourselves and others? And then maybe we can kind of talk a little bit pivoting into management of that.
Yeah. So the first thing is I ask people to rate their stress level on a 0 to 10. Like, what's your stress? 10 being the highest level of stress, 0, none at all. And I ask each of you to do the same thing. So if you're at a 10, definitely routine and putting some things into practice every day are essential, because if we don't, that stress number will likely get higher because we don't have healthy coping mechanisms. So what are some of those routine things? Some of those routine things: bedtime. We know statistically those folks that are getting less sleep have an increased level of anxiety and depression. And so having a regular bedtime, which is really hard to do, if you have kids and you put the kids down, then you want that free time at night, and you end up staying up late and scrolling on the internet, and then it throws your whole day off. So sleep is essential to mental health and reducing stress. Caffeine intake and alcohol intake. How much are you drinking caffeine during the day to kind of keep you going energetically, and how much coffee are you having? Those two can have a high correlation to increasing your stress. That's why the breathing comes in. I want to teach something to everybody watching, because I've heard more people getting panic attacks, whether it's at work or at school or in unexpected places. And I want to teach the 3-3-3 method. So anybody listening has this in their back hip pocket. If you're at work and you're highly stressed and you need a quick coping strategy to get you back to center, here's what it is. You're going to pick 3 things that you see in the room. You're going to describe them. So you might say, oh, I see that notebook. It's 8 by 10, and pick the color, the shape, the size, describe it in detail. You're going to do that with 3 items. You might pick a lamp, a chair, a desk, it doesn't matter. You're going to move on to what can I touch? So I'm touching, my pen. I'm touching the paper I have. You're feeling what's there. You might have a shirt. You might touch your shirt. Because we're using the sensory system to get you back into rhythm, to get you back regulated. And the third thing is you can connect to what you hear. So you might go, okay, I hear birds chirping outside my window. Oh, I can hear the buzzing of the lamp right there. Whatever that is, I recommend sticking to the 3 things you see the most. So you're going to describe those, and then you're going to obviously go back to the breath. Sometimes when we're having a high level of panic, it's hard to get the breath. So you're going to feel your feet on the floor and feel yourself in the chair. That is quick strategies if you feel overwhelmed in the moment to use anytime, anywhere, any place. And they're
repeat 3 things that we can see and describe.
Describe them in detail.
3 things we can touch. Good.
And if you need something in your pocket, put it in there. Yeah. And then 3 things you can hear.
Okay. And what does that do to the brain?
That helps your nervous system. So what that does in the brain is it moves you out of fight, flight, or freeze and moves you through. It's like shifting gears. If you had a car that I was a manual shift driver, you're shifting back into the prefrontal cortex to go, you're okay. You're safe. You can handle this. That's what happens. We don't feel safe. And we are responsible as adults, not as children, for creating that felt sense of safety within us. So then we can think clearly. That's why the breath is so important. Because if we can't think clearly, then what happens is we go offline and we go into panic. And that's why that breath is so important. And then describing 3 things you see, touch, and then you hear helps the nervous system come back to center and go, okay, I'm okay. I can handle this. I got this.
That's helpful. And I'm assuming that we can help coach our kids on the same type of topics too, right? If there ever is some panic issues there, kind of helping them walk through that with them as well. So that's really...
Practice this with my kids so many times.
Awesome. My good friend Allison Hanley had a question about going back to the screen time. Obviously in our schools, they have a different way now when it comes to iPad versus textbook and how that impacts. Do you know anything about any thoughts on studies around iPad usage versus textbook usage in schools and how that might affect folks?
It's a good point that's on the table. If that's research is forthcoming as we speak, we are seeing a correlation between the technology, iPads, and the brain development. And that includes, and you can go pros and cons for both. Sure. So that's a whole nother debate. It's a great point. And it's one that is, right now we're in the middle of trying to figure it out. However, what I'm recommending is, yes, if they have to be on the iPad at school, which they do, if you're in certain school systems, if you have to be on the iPad at school, what I'm recommending is not, sometimes they have homework at home or e-learning and they have to be on it. I'm recommending very limited screen time after that because you will see a difference in behavior. I'm seeing behavior changes as a result of screen time. We just did a detox in our house of no screens because we're like, okay, we need to reset the system. And it was amazing how that totally makes a difference in how they feel about themselves. I will say there is really powerful research on nature, being out in nature and anxiety with children, teens, and adults, how we're missing nature, and that is impacting human development. So when in doubt, get out. When in doubt, get out. So if you're having meltdowns at home, get out, go for a walk, run around the house, get out into nature, get outside, look around, the 3-3-3, see what you hear outside, see what look at what's out there, the birds, the trees, the grass, the snow, whatever's there, and then talk about that. Talk about touch the grass, touch the trees. That is a way to reset. So if your kids are going a little crazy, when in doubt, get out.
Yeah, I love that. And we're gonna have to wrap this up here but that was such good topics today with great questions. Thanks to everybody who had them too. We'll continue this conversation going forward. But hopefully, not only was it a great conversation, Kristen, I really appreciate the advice as parents, as humans, in terms of just practical ways to put this into practice. And again, I want to be very clear. I am so far from perfect. Kristen Boice is probably closer to perfect than I am. You're closer than I am. All right. So, but it all sounds great, but it is something that I deal with every day, and I have a lot of work to do on myself and on my kids, everybody. So, but that's why we're all here to share that and work together on it. So, Kristen, real quick, if I'm in crisis right now, where do I turn?
1-800-273-TALK. I even telling my teens, if they have a friend that's struggling, because this seems to be an issue right now, they can call 1-800-273-TALK. You can call while you're with somebody. If you're like, I don't know what to do, call 1-800-273-TALK. They will talk you through it. Or you can text 741-741. Let's say you don't want the person to know. Text the number. They are there to help you. And then on the City of Noblesville website, there is a ton of local resources. If you need help, there are resources available. I also just want to plug Fueled for School.
Yeah.
Good. Because I was so excited about the shirt. I was like, I love this. Be the good. So,
yeah.
Yes.
Great organization tackling some food insecurities in our community. They're wonderful. And again, people like Christina Trusty just really make me smile. And there is a lot of good in the world, regardless of what you might see on TV at times. So
Mr. Rogers said, look for the helpers.
Look for the helpers. I've used that quote many times actually in speeches. So Kristen Boice, you're a helper and I appreciate it. So thanks for all you do. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss another topic. Please share with your friends and invite them to join us in 2 weeks, and we'll be back live. In the meantime, stay safe. Go Lady Millers. Awesome state championship win. The Lady Miller basketball team this weekend. Had to plug them. Super proud. Not only incredible athletes on the court, but incredible young ladies in the community too. And I'm so proud of them. So Kristen, thanks a million. You're the best.
Thank you.